Good morning, everybody. We will get started. This is a session to continue our interviewing process of particular assistant CAOs, et cetera, that the executive has sent over. Appreciate my colleagues' flexibility of being here today on a Thursday. It's really important that we move this process along. So we're going to get right into it. And first, we will begin with Mr. Alfred Fletcher.
He calls himself Jerome, right? Don't you? Yeah.
Good morning.
Good morning.
We will get started with a number of just specific questions, and then we'll open it up to my colleagues for any comments or any particular questions as well.
Okay.
All right, so tell us specifically about what in your background and what qualifications, bless you, makes you an ideal candidate for the role of assistant CAO in our county.
Okay, absolutely. First of all, thank you for your time. We do appreciate this is unusual for you all, so we do appreciate you making time for us. My qualifications and background that allow me to be the ideal candidate, I have been a public servant now for 20 years. That 20 years of service goes back to Greensboro, North Carolina, where I was raised up and made a business office manager for one of the biggest and largest economic impactors for that city, which was the Greensboro Coliseum Complex. From there, I have had opportunities to serve as two special assistant to city managers in Greensboro as well as the city of Alexandria. The experience from Alexandria gave me a very broad knowledge of city and local government overall and not just targeted in one specific area. Once I left Alexandria, I went to the General Services Administration as an Obama appointee, and my role was the Associate Administrator over the Office of Small Business Utilization. And right there, we had an impact where we were able to procure over $3 billion for the federal government, meeting and exceeding all of our small business goals, which was very high and important for the agency, as you can imagine. After I transitioned out of GSA, I came to DC for local government, where I was Chief of Staff at the Department of General Services, which managing that agency, helping to manage that agency and its projects and capital budget of nearly $1 billion gave me even more knowledge and in-depth information to help me be a successful leader in the government realm. Currently, I am serving as Senior Deputy Director as the Department of Small Business and Local Development in the district, and it has shown me a lot of programs and policies and rules and regulations and a lot of items that will allow me to be transferred over to Montgomery County and allow for some of that success over there to be successful over here. But all of that is in my resume, and as I've spoken to some of you, you know those things that I just said. But what I would say to answer your question, what makes me the ideal candidate is you don't survive as a 20-year public servant without having a lot of passion and persistence, and that's what I bring to the table. I believe that employees should be engaged. We should be passionate and caring about each other and our communities, as well as making sure that we build relationships and collaborate with all of our stakeholders to make sure that shared outcomes are achieved.
And just quickly for the record, Ms. Kassiri, is there the particular policy areas that Mr. Fletcher will be working on?
Yes, he will be focusing on a growing economy and a more affordable and welcoming county.
Thank you so much. So, Mr. Fletcher, so given your experience that you just described, what do you think Montgomery County government needs to do differently in order to stimulate small business growth, especially in traditionally underserved areas of the county?
Sitting here now without knowing exactly all the programs that are in place, my first thing I would say is, and I know that a lot of things have been tried, and you've tried everything, and a lot of things may not have had the results that you wanted, but we have to get out and meet the people where they are. We have to find a way to connect to those who don't want to come to us to get what they need. And there's a lot of different ways to do that. We can build incubator spaces, we can have programs, we can issue grants. But in order for us to get to the people that are underserved, we have to realize what they need and then make sure that we are targeting those areas for improvement.
And do you have any particular lessons that you can draw from your time in Washington, D.C.'s DGS in terms of green investment?
You say green?
Green, yeah, in green areas, yeah.
So at DGS, our green investments were mostly to ensure that buildings that we were constructing or either renovating met the certification so that they could all be qualified to ensure that not only that the agency was following the green standard, but making sure that we were ensuring that the mayor and the other council members were getting the proper recognition for the values that they were pushing down to other leadership.
And I know you alluded to this a little bit, but can you talk a little bit more about strategies that you would use to reach our traditionally underserved communities? There is a very large and very vibrant entrepreneurial community. A lot of it is comprised of immigrants and people of color, and oftentimes what we hear is that they're not very familiar with many of the things that we are doing and the programs that we might have. And so in that respect, can you tell us a little bit about what you see as opportunities here in the county?
Absolutely. The first thing I would say is in order to cultivate a diverse county, you have to understand how to speak to them. So maybe we need to make sure that we are actually speaking not only in English, but another foreign language that would resonate with this particular audience so that they can understand what we are actually saying and how we are trying to reach them and meet them where they are. I'm a big believer that we can leverage technology in a way that will allow us to do the most and reach the most at the same time. We can have programs that are either website driven, we can have programs that are boots on the ground driven, we can have programs for returning citizens, we can have programs for our youth, we can combine that with our summer youth program, tie it to the local university, to the school system. If we all make sure that when we're doing our efforts that are currently underway and we just find a way to include those who are not at the table, then that's how the transformation will happen. There is no magic pill or bullet, so to speak, to make it happen overnight. It's going to take some hard work and effort, and it's actually going to take us and my colleagues working with you and your colleagues to make sure that we communicate and we understand what you guys see and hear, because you guys hear and see a lot more in a lot different ways than we do. So hopefully knowing that we can collaborate together, we can talk about it and eliminate some barriers together.
So a lot of what you just described are things that we've been doing for a very long time. So we have had, things translated. We have had people who have worked as promoters on a grassroots level to, engage with many of these folks, et cetera. I think that probably, you will become quickly familiarized with all those efforts. I think what I know for myself, what I'm looking for is how are we going to leverage that and take it to the next level, because you will very quickly realize that many of those best practices have been, put in place. Have you had any opportunity? I know the executive has mentioned that he plans to also pretty much empower, if you will, the regional services centers and their staff to become more engaged in how to do community and economic development at a grassroots level. Will you be working closely with them? Have you had that opportunity to discuss that shift in how to use the regional services centers?
I have not had that opportunity to discuss it, but it does sound right in alignment with what my duties will be and the outcomes that we want to get to.
Okay, great. Let's see. Are there any potential conflicts of interest of which we should be aware?
No, ma'am.
Okay, thank you. We do have some lights. Now I'll start with Councilmember Jawando.
Thank you, Council President. Alfred, good to see you again. Thank you for being here. I enjoyed our meeting. And you still don't live in Montgomery County, I guess, since the meeting? Okay, that's all right. We'll work on that. Inside joke for my council members. You should still vote for him. And one of the things I said when we spoke, and I just want to reiterate it as far as advice, get to know us, learn the county, and I would say this to both of you. I know you'll be up shortly. Learn what we're doing. Montgomery County has a strong tradition of doing a lot of things and trying a lot of things and being on the cutting edge of a lot of things. And I think to the council president's point, we're at a point now where we need to figure out and assess what we've done and have been doing, and what's not working, change, and then really scale up what is, and then cross-sector cooperation and work, and don't get siloed. There's in these positions, there's a great danger of you being siloed and not necessarily working with the permitting MCDC and all that. And I know that's not ever the goal when you start, but it can happen.
Okay.
And I would just give you that advice and then work with us. If there's things, I was struck when I read your resume, you said you have leadership experience, proven history of exceeding performance targets with limited resources, and that's so showing that you can do it on a shoestring. But if if you don't have what you need, tell the executive, tell your colleagues, but tell us. And I think we're at a time where we need to not just have the Band-Aid approach, not just do things the way we've normally been doing them, but see this change in administration and council and in our county as an opportunity to have some fresh eyes. And that's one of the things I am excited about. The new folks coming in, that you can look at things and maybe not be bound by what's happened in the past and have some new ideas. So that would just be advice. And then the one question I did have for you, tell me a little bit about your work, which kind of follows what the statements I just made with organizational development and working across large bureaucracies and bringing people together to achieve goals. Can you give me a specific example of a time that you've done that in your previous roles?
Absolutely. And to the first part of your statement, I would say that, we are here to build our relationship with council, and that will happen through respect and responsiveness. So if we get that piece of it correctly, I think that we can move down the road together and handle all of our challenges. An example of organizational goals being shared and developed, I would say, is when I was at the GSA. As the president of the Interagency OSBU Council, we all had to come together to make sure that we were working cross-agency, not just individually within our own federal agencies, to make sure that things were in alignment. And a big part of that was ensuring that the small business goals and how we arrived at those goals were consistent with not only my agency's needs and wants, but those of many others. We were able to come together and combine some policy that allowed all of us to have different and various input into the structure of the creation of the goal, which should have led to more agencies meeting and exceeding their goals. When you have that siloed approach, as you mentioned earlier, and all you care about is your own shop, so to speak, you leave a lot on the table. And if you can be as collaborative as possible, and if you can be as inclusive as possible, then I think the result is that much larger.
I appreciate it. And again, enjoyed our conversation. Look forward to supporting you, and thank you. Thank you for being here.
I appreciate it.
Council Vice President Katz.
Thank you, Madam President. And I did learn in our conversation that you do like to be called Jerome. So,
Yes, sir.
Jerome, welcome to the conversation today. I was most impressed when we sat down and chatted. I truly was. I was very pleased to hear about your background in small business and what you're going to bring to the table. I appreciated, and I mentioned it this morning, but I appreciated your explaining to me how the district government does their grant program and for small businesses, and how we need that we don't always want to copy everything the district government does, but we certainly want to do something more like they're doing for a small business, because that's what's sometimes those couple of $1,000s is what gets us A, the person in business, and B, the person to keep that business. And I also appreciated your comment today about your recognition to meet people where they need to be met. That's what business does. I mean, if you're not doing business here, you have to figure out whether you need to make deliveries, whatever it is, you need to change your style. And I think with you and with others in the Eldridge administration, we're going to change your style slightly, enough to make certain that businesses are successful. And I look forward to doing all that. I look forward to voting for you. Thank you.
Councilmember Rice.
Well, thank you very much. And Mr. Fletcher, it's interesting. I like D.C., and I'm a big fan of the mayor, but I'm very concerned about our neighboring city to the south of us that has a gentrification problem. And it's not just a gentrification problem in terms of housing, but also in terms of business. The Huffington Post did an article this past January where they specifically were talking about black businesses and some of the challenges that were faced primarily in areas like Adams Morgan as well as in U Street, and seeing some of the changes that have happened there. And so I'm curious that now that you're leading this effort, that's going to be welcoming of communities, and I think about Silver Spring, I think about areas of the East County that have our African immigrant as well as Latino and Hispanic immigrant populations that are incredibly important to the diversity of Montgomery County. And so I'm curious how you would do things differently from what we see or some of the challenges that we're seeing that are happening in D.C. when it comes to their issues. You know, I can go on and on, 8th Street corridor, the whole 9 yards. My mother used to work at Gallaudet University for 30-some years, so I've seen the changes. And so I'm curious as to what your thoughts are there.
My first thought is to figure out why. You know, why are some of these challenges existing, and what are the efforts being done to remove them? Why I believe that we all can sit back and admire a problem, I don't think any of us have the time to. And I think that what we need to do is know that there's always studies going on, recent studies that have been done, more information and data that needs to be gathered. What I would say is, as I get into this role and peel back the layers of the onion and figure out what has been done in order to remove or reduce the problem that is of concern to you, then we're going to come up with a strategy and a plan. And then we're going to figure out what did work well in the efforts of trying to remove it. And then, as one of your colleagues said, we're going to figure out what didn't work well and do something different. I think that we all need to be prepared that if what has been done has not worked well so far, doing something different is going to be a little uncomfortable. Change, as a change agent, we all know that you're going to be uncomfortable for a short period of time while we get to success. And that is what I pledge to you, is that we will get there.
Well, I would just say, and I think that as you get more acclimated to Montgomery County, I think that we've actually been successful at doing some things that neighboring jurisdictions haven't, which is continuing to support our communities of color here, especially when it comes to business and economic development. I know that the council president and I have worked on a number of initiatives dealing specifically with that. And since your job is tasked with dealing with welcoming and making sure that we have inclusive communities, I would encourage you to spend some time talking to the businesses here, understanding the things that we have done and put in place to secure their effectiveness. But as the council president said, we need to take it to the next level. So we're not trying to compete against a DC to where it's going in the opposite direction. We're actually trying to take ourselves in a more positive direction. And so I look forward to working with you to make sure that those kinds of things happen, because I think that for us, it's a very different dynamic here in Montgomery. So thank you.
Yes, sir.
Councilmember Albornoz.
Thank you very much. It's good to see you again, Mr. Fletcher. My first question is actually for Ms. Kassiri. How is this going to work? So those are two broad areas of objective that are critically important to the long-term success of our county, but as mentioned by my colleague, Councilmember Jawando, involve many different departments. And so how will Mr. Fletcher and the other ACAOs have a reporting structure with those corresponding departments? Will they serve as the liaison to Mr. Klein and then the county executive? What will that hierarchy look like?
They will be reporting to Andrew Klein, our CAO. So not only our departments are involved, each ACAO we're going to coordinate with the outside partners. For each of those priority areas, let's say for growing economy, it's not only county departments. We have, of course, DOT, DTS, DPS, park and planning, but we have many other partners in nonprofit sector, but business community. So the role of the ACAOs will be to coordinate all of that, but with the goal of making sure that those key indicators or outcome areas, the results are delivered, and initially gathering data, monitoring the progress of the performance, and being intimately involved even with during the budget process, how the resources will be allocated to the programs that will positively impact the outcome of these outcome areas. So the reporting is to CAO, and when they were speaking on behalf of the CAO, but coordinating with many players, internally and externally, which is a bit different. So it's not only internal. Per Andrew's direction, actually their main focus is going to be trying to find those partners outside, keep them informed, keep them engaged. Because without the partners, there's no way government can do or make any meaningful progress in any of these areas.
Gotcha. So
Without
it's-
involvement of departments.
Facilitation of convening of the different stakeholders and then tracking outcomes. What about situations that arise where there may be an issue to a department who is in that bucket that requires assistance from the second floor to help address the fire that may come up? Will that also be the role of ACAOs as it has been in previous administrations? Will they then be an advocate for those department heads and those departments to help facilitate and coordinate? Will that be part of their job
Yes,
function?
yes.
Great. Thank you for that. That helps a lot. Mr. Fletcher, I think of all of your experiences, and I think you have a wide variety of experiences in general services and in general government at the both federal and local level. Your role in the city of Alexandria as a special assistant to the city manager's office is probably going to be the one closest to the one that you'll be assuming here in county government, just based on the outcomes that you were able to achieve. And one of them in particular excites me, and that's that you were involved in the creation of the Office of Civic and Community Engagement during your time there. One thing I discovered as I campaigned for the office that I hold now was just how little people know about, not just within an economic construct, but how our county government works, period. And so I'm encouraged to hear your emphasis on wanting to conduct outreach and reach out to communities where they are, as opposed to having them wait to come to county government to solve a problem or look for an opportunity. And to our council president's point, our regional service centers are a critical component in that. And I think that it's sort of a back to the future situation, but I felt maybe lost a little bit of trust over some time, and we're going to have to work to build that back. So I'm excited about those efforts. I will note you've had 5 different positions in the last 10 years, and so you're well traveled. I hope that you're planning on staying here for the long haul, because consistency in these jobs is so important. Once you've established that trust with communities and have that in-depth knowledge, it's critically important to ensure continuity. So I hope you're planning on staying with us for the long haul. I assume you are.
Yes. So the first 14 years of my career, I was in the city of Greensboro and progressively grew through there. In order to get to this seat that I am hoping to obtain today, I had to grow out, and that led me through Alexandria and DC and the federal government. I can tell you all right now, this is the job that I have been looking for. I'm excited about it. It's what I want, and I will do a great job on all of your behalf, and including the ones on my side as well. And I do not want another job, and yes, I will be here for a while.
Great. Thank you.
Councilmember Reamer.
Thank you. I knew that would be your answer, not because it's the right thing to say, but because this job, when you succeed with this job, you're ready for just about anything. And so, it's a good move. I liked your questions, Mr. Albornoz. Thank you. But it was important to ask. I wanted to just hone in a little bit on the outcomes. Could you, maybe I'll ask you, could you restate, please, the outcomes that you're focused on?
A growing economy and an affordable and welcoming county.
So does that roll up what departments does that, I think I get the growing economy component of that, the affordable piece. What are the initiatives or policy areas that involves?
And I don't know all the departments.
So to be fair to Jerome, so this is the plan is for as soon as ACOs are on board, we're going to start convening first internal meetings to make sure they understand the players, key players, who are the players, who are the stakeholders. Right now,
what kind of issues come to the fore when you think about affordability?
Well, it's not only for this, for each of these county executives' 7 priority areas. This includes all aspects of every part of this government and the community. So for a growing economy, it's not going to be only focused on economic development or affordable housing. There are many pieces, small businesses, outreach. So the effort this is going to be collaborative. There could be a lot of cross sections between what each ACAOs are doing. So we don't have an exact list, But this is going to include both external and internal players.
Got that. I'm just trying to get at what are the, what does the administration view making, could you restate the affordability outcome again?
The outcome itself is a growing economy.
Oh, the second one. Is it all one? Is it all one?
No, these are
No,
two.
this is the second one.
The more welcoming, the more affordable and welcoming county.
A more affordable and welcoming county. Okay, so what I was just trying to ask was what does that maybe entail?
So the county, of course, is very diverse.
Yeah.
And what we want to do is ensure that all the different races, gender, and ages have an opportunity to thrive here in the county, just like
Yeah.
other people have as well. To answer your question, as far as the initiatives, like she said, we're trying to figure out what they will look like and how I can fit myself into solving some of those.
I guess very specifically, I was just trying to find out, will you be over the Department of Housing and Community Affairs?
Yes, yeah, for a more affordable and welcoming county, we will focus on the initiatives that make Montgomery County a place where all residents can pursue their dreams, regardless of race, ethnicity, age, and economic circumstances. That will include the HCA, that will include HOC, that will include many other federal agencies and our nonprofit sector as well.
Okay, so housing issues will
Yes,
come to you.
yes.
Okay. I hope I wasn't being too convoluted in trying to get to that point, but affordability is a housing issue. Most of what drives the affordability of the county is housing. And that's most of what you spend. What varies from place to place, the price of milk is fairly consistent across locations, but the price of housing is wildly different. And so promoting housing affordability is at the essence of promoting affordability. So we've got a lot of work to do there. And I think we've got some differences with the county executive, or at least some of us do, about how to promote affordability and housing issues. So I want to have a good, honest dialogue and explore our differences, explore our similarities, see where we can make a difference together, and work closely together. Because I've always worked very closely with the ACAOs. It's a great role, and I look forward to continuing to do that. I have a lot of respect for you, and I know we'll work together well.
Agreed. Me too. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Friedson.
Yeah, I just want to quickly piggyback. I think some really important questions that were asked, and we didn't get a chance to meet. Unfortunately, it was my fault. We had a scheduling issue on my end, and but I appreciate looking at your background and obviously bring a lot to the table. And I think all of the ACAO nominees do. I think that I think some of the questions and confusion are really focused on the change in the roles and how the priority areas and focus areas are going to work in practice. I think all of us share the broad-based priorities. We might have differences in how we achieve those priorities and what the best mechanisms are to get there. But I think that I'm still struggling a bit because sometimes it seems like, bless you back there, sometimes it seems like there are specific departments where an ACAO is viewed as, being directly tied based on their policy area. And sometimes the answer is, well, we're looking for collaboration and there are going to be multiple ACAOs. And so it would just be helpful, I think, for all of us. And I think it would be helpful for you all to be put in a position to succeed, to have a lot more clarity on what these jobs actually are going to be. Because right now it seems that there isn't a lot of clarity for you. And as a result, there's even less clarity, I think, for us. And so both in terms of understanding what your job is going to be and how we can determine whether or not you are succeeding and putting you in a position, frankly, to be able to succeed. And I think from our end of understanding who to call. Who is the ACAO who we're supposed to call when there's a DHCA issue, so that Andrew Klein doesn't get every single one of our phone calls on every single issue that is happening in county government, which is the whole point of it. And so if there could be some more clarity, and whether it's department-based, and here are the specific departments that fall under each ACAO, or whether it is initiative-based of, this specific initiative that is it might involve multiple departments, but it's a very specific initiative with a very specific policy outcome in mind, with very specific funding that goes along with it, so we have a sense of it. I think it would certainly make me feel a lot more comfortable with the new setup, and it would make, I think, all of us in a more collaborative and easier understanding so that we know. I mean, the challenge that I think of is, when you prioritize everything, you end up prioritizing nothing. And if we don't have very specific areas where each ACIO is responsible for, if everybody is responsible for little pieces of everything, I don't think anybody knows who's supposed to take the lead, and I don't think any of us will know who we're supposed to call to carry out an issue. And as Mr. Albornoz brought up, the department directors aren't going to know, when that fire happens, if you have 4 people to call, you've got nobody to call. You should have one person, to call, and if that person isn't there, maybe a backup, who steps in. And so it's not a criticism, it's more of a constructive suggestion and a request that it would really be helpful for us, not just to have the specific priority, broad-based priority areas that are somewhat broad and aspirational, which is good, but very specific, project-based, department-based, directly tied to aspects of funding and the budget, of who is responsible for what area with outside groups, with county agencies, et cetera, so we know who to call on a particular issue. And so we have an idea of exactly what each of you are doing. And I think for your sake, it would help you be in a position to succeed, because you'd actually know what your job is every day. I recognize that there's a tremendous amount of talent. I'm just hoping that we are channeling each of your skill sets and your talents in a way that you can succeed, in a way that is accountable to the public, in a way that we know where we're supposed to turn, and everybody in the leadership of county government knows where to turn to be able to do it.
We'll provide a more clear list. Thank you.
Yes, so, thank you so much, obviously, for stepping up. I think that what you heard here, it's very true. We are all trying to work together in a very collaborative fashion to ensure that the executive, has the people in place that he needs. But the reality is that the issues don't stop, right? And so our phones are ringing off the hook about, continuity and about following up on particular areas and particular projects and things like that. And it is so important to know who's going to be the point person for X, Y, and Z. So, we are very cognizant of that, and we want to do whatever we can to expedite this, but there is no doubt, Ms. Kasiri, that we really will need literally like a chart to understand who is in charge of what particular areas, so we can continue to do our work, and we can, push forward with our constituents what it is that they're expecting and what is the delivery. I want to say to you that, the whole notion of this small business area, policy area is really big, because to be honest, it wasn't necessarily something that we felt was elevated to the point that it should have been. And so that's going to be a really important piece. And you're going to find, again, that there's a lot going on, but there needs to be somebody that is shepherding all this through. And there's a lot of expectation out there, I think, in our communities, because we've all said that this is going to be a major priority going forward. So we're all going to be watching that very closely. And we will be here to work with you, again, collaboratively as well. So with that, I think that we can wrap up this particular interview, and we will proceed. And then after this second interview, then we will take a vote.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr.
Thank you.
Fletcher. Okay, so now we're going to move on to the interview with Ms. Caroline Sturgis. Good morning. All right, and so to get started, maybe Ms. Kasiri, you can tell us, what the priority outcomes areas will be, so that we have a better
Sure, for
understanding. of this
Caroline is
engagement.
safe neighborhoods and thriving youths and families,
Okay,
2
wonderful.
of the 7 areas.
Okay, thank you so much. Thank you. All right, Ms. Sturgis, so tell us specifically about your background and your qualifications, and why do you think that those make you an ideal candidate for the role of Assistant CAO in our county, given those priority areas?
Sure. Good morning, Madam President and members of the council. I am humbled and honored by County Executive Mark Ehrlich's appointment as Assistant Chief Administrative Officer. I thank you for the opportunity of this interview and allowing me to share why I am the right choice for this role. I am a public servant with over 20 years of experience. Throughout my career, I have refined my skills in financial management, budget development, and fiscal oversight, staff management and development, performance management, and strategic planning. My career in local government started shortly after college as an employee for the Broward County Clerk of Courts office in Fort Lauderdale, Florida. As an administrative assistant for an integrated justice information systems project, I had the opportunity to interface with all levels of the organization and served as a project liaison for the county agencies, including Clerk of Courts, Court Administration, Broward Sheriff's Office, the State's Attorney's Office, and the Public Defender's Office. I worked for the clerk's office for 6 years, ending my tenure as the Financial Operations Manager. During my time there, I participated in the Selection and Negotiation Committee for the procurement and implementation of a new financial and HR system that optimized business operations. I left Broward County, Florida, for a new job and a relocation to Baltimore, Maryland 15 years ago. I started working at the Housing Community Development. As a real estate officer, I collaborated with a project team that spawned the development of mixed-income housing, community schools, a life sciences center, commercial businesses, and green spaces surrounding the Johns Hopkins Hospital. As the Assistant Director of Property Acquisition and Relocation, I supervised a team of 12 and collaborated with various city departments in the execution of strategic plans for the revitalizations of city neighborhoods through economic development and redevelopment projects. I was at Housing for 6 years before moving on to my next role in the city at the Finance Department, the Budget Office. As a budget management analyst, I coordinated with 15 city agencies for the formulation of annual budgets using outcome-based budgeting strategies. I was one of the first city employees to achieve advanced lean training and utilize the concepts to help agencies eliminate waste, achieve cost savings, and improve service deliveries. One of the agencies I worked closely with was the Police Department, which led to my next role. At the Police Department, I started as the Director of Fiscal Services and managed a team of 35 sworn and civilian professionals. I directed the daily financial operations, including accounting, payroll, procurement, accounts payable, cash management, grants management, and fleet management. After 2 years, I was promoted to the Chief Financial Officer and Chief of Management Services. In my role, I oversaw the administrative areas of the department, including finance, human resources, IT, and asset management. I mentored and coached a 5-person management team of directors with oversight of a staff of 80. Some of my achievements during my 4-year tenure included reorganizing the department's budget to increase transparency for program funding, executed a staff analysis project that resulted in a civilianization plan that identified over 200 sworn positions that could be civilianized to generate long-term cost savings of $7 million. Deployed lean strategies to improve the department's internal purchasing process and promote a paperless office. Efforts resulted in a reduction of time from the receipt of an internal purchase requisition request to entering that requisition into the city's central purchasing system by 63%. And my final accomplishment was establishing the department's first ever employee health and wellness program that provided free and confidential resources to all employees, both sworn and civilian. I later assisted the fire department in establishing a similar program for its employees. In my last role with the City of Baltimore, I served as the city's Deputy Budget Director. In addition to performing traditional budgeting functions, I'd like to share 2 key accomplishments that support my qualifications for this position. I established and led a bi-monthly forum focused on improving the city's overall financial management with 50 agencies and department fiscal officers. The roundtable discussions fostered cross-agency collaboration in addressing complex fiscal and programmatic issues. I also developed and managed a focused research agenda for a team of 16 consisting of 25 projects, such as a research of a long-term financial solutions for the city's landfill, which is due to reach capacity in 2026, and the review of the city's Charm City Circulator funding, which was reporting deficits over a number of years. The results of these research projects and recommendations are now being used by the Department of Finance and the city to drive policy decisions. In summary, my experiences over the past 20 years have prepared me for this role. I can bring a different perspective to the way the county manages its operations. I have experience in disrupting mediocre performing programs and managing change to yield high-performing units. With extensive financial management experience, a team player attitude and spirit, consistent success in the achievement of objectives, and a proven track record in delivering exceptional public service, I commit to contributing the same level of performance to this position.
Thank you. So given the experience that you just described, especially as Deputy Budget Director for the City of Baltimore, what overall recommendations would you make to increase efficiency in Montgomery County government?
So the recommendations I would be making would be, first of all, in collaboration. So one of my, want to share like maybe some of my top priorities, right? At this point, I cannot make any recommendation, but what I am committed to doing when I start the position is basically learning, understanding, problem solving, and responding. You know, I plan to spend my first initial months learning the county inside and outside of the government and the people working on both sides. In preparing for this job, I've learned that the county is facing a number of issues similar to other local jurisdictions across the country. Some of the issues that I've heard have been equity disparities, community safety, affordable housing challenges, traffic fatalities, flattening revenues, economic issues, and school issues. I look forward to building strong and positive working relationships that will yield to the development of strategic plans and address these issues with others. What I will do is focus on fostering cross-agency collaboration to help in developing the best recommendations for addressing these issues.
Okay. And are there any particular management techniques that you can describe a little bit more in depth that would assist you in executing what you just described?
Sure. I think a key management technique is collaboration, ensuring that, you know, everyone has a seat at the round table. I briefly shared, you know, one of my experiencing in managing, being the deputy budget director for the city of Baltimore. I thought it was important for all of the city's appointed fiscal officers to have a seat at the round table, to have this discussion where everyone, because one agency could be experiencing a problem that another agency is experiencing as well, and trying to troubleshoot that issue. But bringing everyone to the table, having this round table discussion allows all the issues to be aired out, and everyone can contribute on the best solution for moving forward. So I think that is a very important management concept, is ensuring that all of the key stakeholders have a seat at the table. Not only do they have a seat, but we allow their voices to be heard in problem solving and identifying the right solutions.
Great. And in terms of community outreach strategies, can you tell us a little bit about what is your understanding of Montgomery County's, you know, demographic makeup, and then what would be some ways that you would involve all communities, but particularly what would you do to engage underserved communities?
Sure. I do understand that Montgomery County is a diverse county, so I'm very pleased and excited to work with the demographics in Montgomery County. I'm a big supporter of community engagement. I think it's very important, as we've heard earlier from my colleague, that, you know, local government cannot solve all of the problems. We have to be engaging with the county residents. And I know that not everyone feels comfortable in working with the government. There is some who have mistrust, and then there are those that are very supportive. So I think it's important that we continue to maximize the relationships that we do have with those who are engaging, and for those who are not engaging for whatever the reasons are, and the reasons vary, right? I think it's our job to reach out to those individuals and meet them however we can. There's a multifacets in how to engage those. Town halls, community meetings, of course, are a big factor in engaging those individuals. I think with the technology and development of apps, social media, various online platforms is another venue of engaging residents to participate in the conversations. My goal is to have collaborative conversations as well as actions and trying to solve these solutions. So from my past experience, we have had online forums for residents to be able to engage in processes. In particular, when I was the deputy budget director, I also have experience in having live Facebook and live Twitter feeds as an opportunity for residents who aren't available to come down to the time City Hall, especially since a lot of community meetings tend to happen during the day. For those that are working, they have the opportunity to engage through those social media platforms. So that is something that I look forward to continuing.
Are there any potential conflicts of interest of which we should be aware?
None that I'm aware of.
Okay. Councilmember Jawando.
Thank you, Council President, and Ms. Sturgis, it's good to see you again.
Thank you very much, likewise.
And thank you for the great testimony and professionalism that which you presented yourself. And I really liked that. It was like old school, right from the jump. It had a good opening statement. I think we should do that more often. And you laid out all your qualifications in a great way. One of the things we talked about, which I wanted to ask you about for the benefit of my colleagues, you have two very important areas, safe neighborhoods, and I would underscore what my colleague said in the questioning Mr. Fletcher, that we need to have this list of what's going to fit into that. I'll just say that that would be helpful. But from what I assume that's going to be in safe neighborhoods and thriving youth and families, you're going to be involved in two of the areas that are extremely important for our diverse communities, whether it be positive youth development efforts, policing, areas where there are significant challenges but also opportunities. I wanted to ask you specifically and allow you to expound this concept of outcomes-based budgeting, which you've been very involved in, and obviously you worked with our CAO on this in Baltimore. How do you see that applying, and if you can use a specific example in Baltimore with the police context, to community engagement and community policing efforts? You did a couple of other examples, but can you, if you didn't do one there, could you tell me how you might think you could use that outcomes-based budgeting model in engagement with community, particularly in the policing context?
Sure. Sure. So with the City of Baltimore as the CFO, as well as the Chief of Management Services, the fiscal shop was underneath me. So I was responsible for developing the police department's budget. So I got quite a number of years working in a law enforcement agency. And one of the experiences that I had at the City of Baltimore is the transparency of the police budget. There was definitely a lot of questions and concerns about that. Many felt it to be just difficult to interpret. So that's why it was one of my goals, and one of the achievements I did was in reorganizing the budget to make that budget to be more transparent. But I took it a step further than that. I was fortunate to have a police commissioner at the time that was very supportive of community engagement. I took the first steps of actually going out into the community to do town hall meetings on the police department's budget, not the city's budget. Now, this was a member of the police department out in the community doing a show, a demonstration on the police's budget. I can honestly say that the conversations were not easy, right? They were very difficult conversations to have because when I got there, people were expecting representations from the police. Representation from the police department. The questions that were being asked were questions that were outside of my purview. So I was challenged in redirecting the conversations to make them to be more productive regarding their input and issues concerning the budget. So with the City of Baltimore and outcome-based budgeting, we do engage residents in our results team. The results team basically reviews all agency proposals, and from there, they have an opportunity to make a recommendation to the mayor and senior team. So by me being able to go out into the community and explain the budget, armed the residents with the knowledge that they needed to be able to make the appropriate recommendations. So if that's the opportunity that will be available here at Montgomery County, I look forward to providing those type of guidance of how we can make the budgets transparent for residents.
Well, I appreciate you illuminating that, because I thought that was an innovative approach. And as you know, we are going to have or in the midst of having a search for a new police chief. And when our police chief retires in April. And I think it would be a great opportunity, as several of us on the council, I have a bill, and Councilmember Reamer and others are interested in policing and community policing in particular. We have the opportunity to make that an emphasis point with not only the hiring of a new chief, but also engaging our community in what they think a good model for police community relations can be. And I think that's something that I thought was very interesting, that town hall format that you all did in Baltimore. And thank you for expounding on that. One other quick question. You mentioned the landfill research.
Oh, yes.
And talk about that a little more, because we're in the process here of, in the next couple of years, having to decide how to shut down our incinerator. And so I am personally, and I know others have opinions, but I'm concerned about, as we move to zero waste and try to make that effort, how we're going to approach that in a thoughtful way. I don't know if that falls into you specifically. Maybe it doesn't. It's probably in Ash's or other.
Adriana's area.
Adriana's area. Okay, all right. Well, I'm still curious to hear about it.
The research we did?
Yeah, and how it was used.
Sure. The purpose of the research was the Department of General Service brought to the finance attention that the landfill will reach capacity at 2026. So we were challenged with, at 2026, what are we going to do? Are we basically going to shut down the landfill and start shipping our waste out? Are we going to look at options for expanding the landfill? What are the costs? What are the financial impacts as well as the programmatic impacts to the city for doing this? So we had a budget analyst that worked closely with the Department of General Services, the Department of Planning, to explore all of our options, as well as the time frame in meeting the 2026 deadline. So there were a number of recommendations that did come out of that. Right now, I'm not at liberty to disclose those recommendations, because I'm not sure exactly how the mayor is going to move forward on that, but I can say that I was very pleased in the progress that our team internally was able to do by researching and coming up with the recommendations, which hopefully will be used to drive the mayor's policy.
Thank you very much. And again, it was a pleasure meeting you. Look forward to working with you in an ongoing way, and look forward to supporting you today.
I thank you. I'm going to follow up. I am humbly disappointed that you did not ask me about moving to Montgomery County, because
Do we have an update?
I do, yes. So since our conversation, yes, my husband and I have been doing some research to find areas that would be affordable for us. So we're still in research. I have not finalized exactly where my new home will be yet.
Well, I still offer to help you on that, and let the record reflect that I brought a taxpayer into the counties.
We'll make note of that. All right, Councilor Rice.
Thank you very much, Madam President. Fariba, I'm going to start with you because Councilmember Joando has alluded to some of the things that, in his questioning, that safe neighborhoods and thriving youth and families entails. But as chair of the Education and Culture Committee, I really want to understand what, in fact, safe neighborhoods and thriving youth and families encompasses before I ask Ms. Sturgis some questions.
So the safe thriving youth and safe neighborhood encompasses, I'm going to read, actually, we have some key indicators for that priority outcome. We will address crime and pedestrian safety issues and seek input from communities across the county on ways to address these issues. We plan to enhance opportunities for walking, biking, and creating neighborhood gathering places. That's for the safe neighborhoods. And for the thriving youth and families, children need great schools, supportive families, and caring communities to help them succeed in life. We can give them the start they need by providing adequate funding for public schools, access to affordable early childhood education, and expanded high school options, and support for programs that relieve stress on families through increased access to affordable housing and better paying jobs.
Okay. Thank you. So, Ms. Sturgis, you are incredibly accomplished in your resume in terms of from a fiscal and financial background. I didn't hear you talk much about education and being the chair of the Education and Culture Committee, and certainly seeing not only how within our education system, but also with the various departments that feed our children outside of the school day. Can you give me a little bit of your understanding of what it is that some of our challenges are here in Montgomery County that you'd like to see us work on? And if you're not aware of those, I understand you're coming from Baltimore, that's perfectly fine. So I'll stop there because I have a number of other questions.
Yeah, yes, absolutely, sure. So, so there is a learning curve. I'm well aware of that, but I am committed to learning all of the school challenges. I know the challenges that we saw in Baltimore City are different than what's in Montgomery County. So that will be what I will be doing within the next couple of weeks and months. So I look forward to working with you, Councilman Rice, and understanding what all those challenges are, as well as what I will learn from our CAO, and bringing in all of the correct internal partners as well as external partners, and gaining a better understanding of how to move forward in addressing those issues.
Okay. I'll leave education alone then, because I certainly want to respect the fact that, and it is something that's incredibly difficult. Let me just chime in a little bit that it's going to take you much longer than a couple months to learn about what's happening here in Montgomery County with our education system. Being born and raised here, I'm still learning each and every day, and conducting an education budget forum last night certainly is one in which we continue to learn about the nuances that are here that are impacting the ability for us to be able to assure, Ms. Kasiri, what you just listed, which is that equitable framework surrounding all of our children being able to attain a high-quality education. But let me go to the Safe Neighborhoods one, because that's something that as a district council member is incredibly important to me. And seeing the challenges that we saw in Baltimore City when it comes to police relations, I'm very curious. I saw your experience with the Baltimore City Police Department. What are some of the things that you wish Baltimore City had done differently when it comes to approaching its community relations with ensuring that there's a better relationship between communities of color and the Baltimore City Police?
As far as what, so I believe, you know, what I would say is I think the department has done is step up their engagement and outreach efforts. There are definitely a disconnect between the department and the community, and we saw that bubble up and a few years ago. As a result of that, the department, as well as the result of the consent decree, the department did have to increase its engagement and outreach efforts. So I think there is definitely a long road ahead. However, the department is taking the strides in the right direction to improving those relationships, which is by getting out into the community, engaging all of the residents of Baltimore City and having those conversations, right? So there's a number of things that's been going on, whether it's having pizza in the precinct, coffee with a cop. There's been shopping experiences during the holiday season. So there's a number of engagement activities that have come online since the unfortunate incident that happened a few years ago with the Freddie Gray.
So let me just say that I believe, and having friends who are in elected office in Baltimore City, the problem is much more than Freddie Gray. It's a systemic problem that we've seen that's been pervasive throughout the department for a number of years, and something that I've seen in the District of Columbia. We actually had it here in Montgomery County being born and raised here, and I remember when the lawsuit happened here in Montgomery County that affected our police department, that really started us in a systemic change in terms of where we wanted to go. And I've seen a tremendous growth for us here in Montgomery County to where we do have residents who now are much more trusting of our police department and much more engaged, doing all of the things you mentioned about the true community policing model and being out there and engaged in the community. I would encourage you to make sure that you engage with our communities, primarily our communities of color here, so that you can learn the nuances of what is going on and what some of the hindrances still are between getting that ultimate level of trust that we want to achieve here in Montgomery County. This is going to be a tremendous learning curve, but certainly something in which I think, based on your resume, you'll certainly be able to tackle. So, thank you.
Thank you.
Councilmember Albornoz.
Thank you, Madam President. First, thank goodness, Ms. Kassiri, you are still there. You have served as the acting director, I think, of every department in Montgomery County at one point or another. And you, I can readily see, will be the glue that really helps bridge this transition. So to our future ACAOs, listen to Fariba. She is a tremendous asset to this county government, and I've seen her in action for 12 years now, and we're fortunate to have her where she is. I do have a couple of questions, particularly to your role in overseeing thriving youth and families. My understanding is that Ms. Bibi Ortero, who is a longtime friend, has been hired by the administration. What will her role be, and how will she be involved in this very important objective of thriving youth and families, and how will she be working with our ACAOs?
Yeah, she was hired as a special assistant to county executive, one of the part-time special assistant to county executive, focused on early childhood areas or any other area that she will be advising the county executive. The ACAO's role going to be much deeper. They're going to be following these key indicators, establishing how the success is going to look like, and bringing the players together and monitoring if we are reaching the goal that. So they're going to be more engaged. BB's role is more of advisory, just like any other special assistants. But she's going to be working very closely with all ACAOs as well. Maybe mostly with Caroline, just because of her portfolio.
So, for a little bit of context, our Positive Youth Development Initiative has lost some steam in the last couple of years, and really needs to be invigorated as soon as possible. And I think given that there's a vacancy in our Health and Human Services Department, which is a critical function to the long-term success of that initiative, and given that the Recreation Department, Ms. Riley, is continuing to do her old job and her new job, and also has 2 vacant division chief positions available, the ability of the executive branch right now is compromised in order to fully address the positive youth development issues. And so while, Caroline, you're going to have to learn a lot very fast and be able to lead very quickly because those agencies need a lot of help right now. There was, of course, yet another likely gang-related homicide that we learned about in the news just less than 48 hours ago, and that is on the heels of there being a record number of gang-related homicides the prior year before that. So we are in a critical phase here, and so there will not be a lot of time, and so this is an all-hands-on-deck situation, and our office will be as helpful as it can be, as I know my colleagues are all very passionate about this issue as well, but this is something that needs to be convened almost immediately. And I know that there's some interest among my colleagues in conducting a session in the near future specifically to discuss the Positive Youth Development Initiative and how it can be reinvigorated. But I'm also concerned with the transition of our police chief. It's just not an optimal time to be having these challenges in a state of transition. So that's more of a comment than a question, and you answered my question regarding Ms. Ortero. But I do look forward to working with you specifically within that space because it happens to be one I'm especially passionate about and have a lot of experience in. But thank you, and I look forward to supporting you. But if you have any comments regarding that, please feel free to share those with us now.
Thank you, and I do look forward to working with you as well.
Yeah, I actually suggested to my colleague Albornoz and to my colleague Vice President Katz that a joint session on the positive youth development would be initiative, I think, should be scheduled as soon as possible. I know, Councilmember Friedson, you have a lot of interest in this because of this latest incident, but it is something that we're all very concerned about and want to make sure that it happens. So I look forward to that being scheduled. And that would be a good opportunity for you to also participate in all of that. Councilmember Friedson.
Yes, I am particularly interested in both the horrific recent incident that happened in my district and actually not far from, really just about a half mile from where I live and about a tenth of a mile from where my brother and sister-in-law and their kids used to live. They recently, a couple years ago, moved not far, also in District 1 from there, but so obviously hit close to home. And speaking of the Freddie Gray incident, I agree that it was, the symptom, one kind of inflection point of a much larger issue. And when that happened, I was working in Baltimore. We had a large, our second largest office is in Baltimore in the comptroller's office, but then I took over the 529 program, and I was in Baltimore during that day, and we had to make the difficult decisions of whether, what we were going to do with a large staff of, hundreds of employees, and there was obviously a lot of concern. And so the issue of safe neighborhoods, of community policing, of the buy-in that you talked about is, I think, extends beyond just police. It extends to the economic development and to the businesses that were affected, not just the ones directly in the, in the area that were, some of which were destroyed or impacted, but the broader issue of the, the chill that it sent across the city of folks who were just concerned about their safety and those who didn't feel comfortable frequenting these local businesses. So I appreciate you saying that, and also with the positive youth development issues with Councilmember Albornoz as the two most immediate past and immediate past chairs of the Montgomery County Collaboration Council for Children, Youth, and Families that deals with a lot of these positive youth development issues. I think that it's critically important. I did just want to say a couple things. One is I really appreciate the financial background that you have, and I think that it is absolutely important. I think, follow the money. It is fundamental to what we are doing, how we're doing it, and what we're getting for it when it comes to government. And I hope that you will be given the ability to really provide an extra set of eyes and oversight that we talked about, which I think we could use more of, quite honestly. And I think this council would like to be a partner in that and to be able to understand where there are shortcomings and provide resources where appropriate and where necessary, where we should be providing more either technological or personnel resources to ensure that oversight is happening so that we can deliver on the outcomes that we talked about it, to feed the areas that are required so that we're not starving the very fundamental issues of being able to provide the goods and services and the programming that government requires. So I really appreciate that background and the extensive conversation that we had. I will just end by not beating a dead horse. The broader question, I think the more we kind of talk about the different policy areas, the more confused I get, because we talked about in the Thriving Youth and Families, the increasing access to affordable housing and better jobs, and I agree that that is a fundamental aspect of thriving youth development, but it now throws me back into a loop because I seemed pretty clear that our last nominee, that was in his bailiwick, and I do clearly think that these issues are intertwined in a way that is absolutely essential. You can't talk about early childhood education without talking about equity, but you also can't talk about jobs without talking about equity. When we talked about the incinerator earlier, we weren't talking about the environmental issues, that was clearly in Ms. Hochberg's portfolio, but in your portfolio, we were talking about walking, biking, pedestrian safety, and to me, that is fundamentally in the environmental protection side. So I will just reiterate what I've already said to say that it would be really, really important for us to be really clear and for you to be clear in order to be able to do your job to clearly understand specifically what are the exact areas that you will be overseeing and that all the other ACAOs will be overseeing so that we can all work together to provide the outcomes that we all hope to achieve for the residents that we all share and serve. So, thanks.
Councilmember Katz.
Thank you very much, Council President. It was very nice meeting with you when we had the discussion in my office, and I sincerely appreciated the good conversation that we have. I think it is no great secret to any of us that the Baltimore Police Department has had problems for many, many years. It was way before riots that brought it to the forefront. I mean, the Baltimore Police Department has had serious issues, and in fact, Montgomery County has, during the riots, have come to Baltimore to help them calm the situation and to do it in a proper and a quick way because of their police officers, the training that they've received and the equipment that they have and all the things that are so very necessary. So I believe that in many cases, in many ways, what you're bringing to, what you will find in Montgomery County is that we don't nearly have the problems that the Baltimore Police Department has. That's not to say that that we have no problems. Of course we do. But we certainly are you're going to find that you're in many ways coming to a place that is in much better shape than the other police departments that you've dealt with. As the chair of public safety, we're going to be dealing with each other quite a bit, and I look forward to that. My colleagues have already touched on the safe neighborhoods. We certainly need to do that, and of course, for the positive youth development, we do need to have a conversation, more than one conversation, as quickly as possible to figure out what's the best way to get ourselves back on track. And we've done this over time. We've had we've had the incident this week. For a year or more, we really have not had the homicides. We had it 2 years prior, but not last year. That doesn't mean that you stop doing whatever you're doing. In fact, you maybe have to redouble your efforts to make sure that the problems aren't there. But getting back to the idea of the silos, I talked about this earlier this morning, but I applaud the CAO and I applaud the county executive that we shouldn't be siloing problems. The fact that there's some confusion about who would be in charge of what, we need to make certain that this puzzle fits together. And when we start siloing problems, it's like that's not my issue, that's somebody else's, and that part of the puzzle doesn't fit as tightly and as nicely together. Bless you. The whole idea for the gangs, talked about this earlier today too. Years ago, we talked about prevention, intervention, and suppression. We realized then that we can't solve it through just a police department. We realized it then that we can't solve it with any separate government agencies. We needed our nonprofits, and we still do, and we need to make certain that they're engaged. We need to make certain that we're doing it all to make certain that the young people, in most of the cases, this is involving young people, that they are getting the resources that they need and that we are helping them get that so that they can have a better life and we all can have a better community. So I look forward to voting for you, and I look forward to working with you. I know that we're going to have a lot of conversation. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Hucker.
Thank you, Madam President. Ms. Sturgis, thank you so much for your willingness to serve. You definitely have a varied and impressive background. And as usual, Councilmember Rice is correct that he is learning a lot every day, as are we all. Ms. Kasiri, let me ask you a couple quick questions first. just to follow up on the Vice President's questions, I think, Ms. Sturgis, you're going to find none of us like silos, and yet we all like clear lines of authority and accountability. And so it'll be your challenge to make sure you're breaking down silos and maintaining clear lines of accountability. Ms. Kasiri, okay, if Ms. Sturgis is in charge of those two outcomes or emphases of safe neighborhoods and thriving youth and families, can you tell us, is there a decision yet about which departments she'll be overseeing?
They won't oversee any department. CAO oversees the department. So they will be in a
Sure.
coordinating role to make sure the issues get resolved and we have a strategic approach to deliver those outcomes.
Fair enough.
But we don't, yes, you're correct. We don't have a complete list, but we should come, and you're going to see overlap.
Police would be one.
Yes, yes, you're correct.
Court
yes.
system is another?
Yes.
State's attorneys?
Yes.
Okay, great. And thriving youth and families, is that largely HHS?
Could be
Is that
HHS,
recreation?
recreation could be involved, other nonprofits in the area,
Right.
in the community, a lot of nonprofits in the community.
I'm trying to ask the question that you've heard a few times, like, I think less directly, and
So
what we could expect.
I hear you clearly. You're looking for a list. I promise you will develop a list.
And then, once there's a list, what are your thoughts on the priorities and the work plan for the first quarter, say?
So when we have actually priorities, then each ACO is going to be, they're going to convene these, what we call, actually, we have these priority key indicator groups. So first they're going to learn, they need to understand, learn the players, the process, but mostly players within the community and internally in the government. And they are going to develop these meeting or committees involving all the outside internal partners to develop actually non-measurable, because we have developed some sort of indicators, but now we have to come up with actually performance for each of those indicators. And start understanding what data they need to collect, and eventually in short-term and long-term measure performance. So as far as how that's going to look like, I could say, I would tell you, I think maybe in the immediate next few weeks, they're going to learn and they're going to organize these groups to bring the players together. Players is going to include council members, council representatives. As far as how this is going to look like, as you say, Andrew Klein's approaches with this model is a brand new model. This is basically government cannot work in silo type model. It means we do need some high-level champions that understand the issues and understand the results government is trying to develop to be able to orchestrate all of that, to be able to help the CAO to orchestrate all of that. So I hope I answered your question, but as far as how the...
It's helpful, for sure. I don't want to ask you to get too in front of your skis here. I know it's a work in progress,
Yes.
and I look forward to the continued updates on these goals. Ms. Sturgis, you talked about police accountability and trust building in the community, so I just wanted to return to that a little bit. The Vice President mentioned the role of police training. I was a little surprised I didn't hear you talk about police training as, if you ask the Montgomery County Police, as the Vice President said, they would say they feel like there's a deficit of police training among the Baltimore Police Department, and setting aside whatever reasons there would be for that. If that's the case, I don't know if you have thoughts on either reflecting on Baltimore, or maybe you have, I don't know how much familiarity you have with the Montgomery County Police in your short candidacy here, but do you have thoughts on the importance of that and what we might be able to do differently, reflecting on your experience?
Yeah, sure. So there were a number of things that I did not mention. My time at the police department, the one thing that I can definitely say, walking away, it is a very complex organization with years of challenging, right? So I just did a very short snippet. But, in addition to the staffing issues, there is definitely training, there's definitely issues with resources, technology, and the list goes on and on there. There has been a significant investment made in the police department in recent years, financial investment to help bring the resources that are needed to help the department improve.
And you talked about outreach and a couple of the approaches that are used there and used here, the pizza in the precinct and coffee with a cop. I know there's probably widespread concern about those things, not that they're in effect, not that there's anything wrong with them, but they have limited effectiveness, right? Because the people we really need to reach, that we're intending to reach, would never want to have coffee with a cop, right? But there's a value in building deeper relationships with the people who self-identify and want to be supportive and build a relationship with the police, but they don't go far enough. Do you want to talk at all about how you see the role of other government agencies or the role of nonprofit partners in that outreach?
Absolutely. I think that they can facilitate those conversations, and there's a lot of those partnerships that are happening with some of the softer, gentle, nonprofit, non-governmental agency to organize those conversations with the police department and the community, and I think those can be very effective. I think it's also important to have those creative ideas. You know, one solution doesn't necessarily work for every single community, and it's getting out there, trying and seeing what works, and for the things that are working, continuing those, and for those that are not, eliminating them and coming up with creative solutions to find alternate solutions that will work for those conversations.
You've had a lot of experience managing nonprofit contractors in your previous jobs, I'm assuming, right?
Managing nonprofit contractors, not direct experience, no.
Just preparing budgets that affect them, okay.
Yes,
You have thoughts
preparing
on
budget.
how you measure success, especially in areas that are murky like this, and how you manage them for the results that you're trying to achieve? Do you have thoughts on how to do that?
Do I have thoughts on
successfully?
how to do it? So I think what's important is at the outset is definitely working with the nonprofit to set the correct performance measures. Not doing them absent in a vacuum. We can't do it at the budget office or at the performance management office. However, it needs to be a collaborative conversation to ensure that the measures are the right measures. That's the first step. Then the next step is actually monitoring the performance against those measures at the appropriate timelines, whether it's monthly, quarterly, whatever is the right time check for monitoring those performance measures, you do that. And over a period of time, once we gather enough data and evidence, it's just to see are those performance measures working? Is the program effective? Is the program as successful as we anticipated it to be? If not, what are the factors that are limiting the success of those programs? What are the new resources that may need to be infused into the program to help bring up the effort? The other thing that I want to say is that, you know, success is evolving and it should be continuous, right? I don't think, you know, once we've reached a particular target, we stay there. I think it's important to constantly evaluate programs, look at lean, look at strategies to ensure that, you know, we're operating as efficiently as possible. One of the concepts of lean is eliminating waste, finding the most efficient way there, and I think it's important to have the regular monitoring and evaluation and also the continuous improvement in looking at programs.
Terrific, okay. Thank you very much again for your willingness to serve.
Absolutely, thank you.
Councilmember Glass.
Thank you, Madam President. I just wanted to make a quick comment and say that I really appreciate the conversation that we're having, the conversation from this side of the dais and on your side as well. It is really helpful to help understand how the county executive is building his government, and for you all to understand the needs that we have in making sure that our constituencies are served properly and that we can help channel the bureaucracy or move within the bureaucracy and know what the point people might be to help our constituencies. And, you know, I've saved this comment listening for everybody, but from Ms. Sturgis and Mr. Fletcher and Ms. Hochberg from earlier this week, I think reshaping our government at this level is good at this time. The county executive said that we needed to reshape government. Most of us, or all of us, know that we need to modernize and find some more efficiencies, and moving from silos to what might be considered wide baskets is what it sounds like we're trying to do. And the need from all of us, that org chart, I'll add to the chorus. The org chart is really important, but I'm optimistic that this framework will work. I'm hopeful that this framework will work. You know what we need. I appreciate having heard and met with both of you. Look forward to working with you, and again, appreciate the good conversation that we've had this afternoon.
Okay, thank you so much. So, Mr. Fletcher, if you can join the table. Join your colleagues there. All right, so having wrapped up the interview, we're going to move on. Did somebody say, oh, we're going to move on to take a vote. So first, it's Mr. Alfred Jerome Fletcher, who's been appointed as Assistant Chief Administrative Officer. I need a motion.
I so move. Second.
Okay, Council Vice President Katz has moved and seconded by Councilmember Reamer. All those in favor of confirming the county executive's nomination of Alfred Jerome Fletcher as Assistant Chief Administrative Officer, please raise your hand.
Some people raise their hand before they
That's
ask. I just want to know.
That is unanimous. Congratulations, Mr. Fletcher. We look forward to working with you. All right, and next we have the county executive appointment of Caroline Sturgis for Assistant Chief Administrative Officer. Is there a motion to confirm this appointment? Councilmember Jawando, seconded by Councilmember Friedson. All those in favor of confirming the county executive nomination of Caroline Sturgis as Assistant Chief Administrative Officer, please raise your hand. And that is unanimous. Congratulations, Ms. Sturgis. We look forward to working with you. All right, now the fun begins. Take care, everybody.
I guess the